Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today. I'm grateful to have you here to spend some time. I was gifted the Sizzix Stencil and Stamp Tool along with some other goodies from Sizzix and Scrapbook.com. And I will say, this is the first time I've ever used this tool. As you can see, I am unboxing it. I'm really excited that it's the cherry blossom color, which is exclusive to scrapbook.com, and it matches my Sizzix Big Shot switch just perfectly. It also matches my rose quartz Misty and my very similar cherry blossom colored Stampendous tool. So lots of fun pink things in my craft room. And I definitely should have read some directions before I use this, and you'll see why later, but it's okay because the part of this that I guess you could say damaged is very easily replaceable, and that is this sticky sheet. So I'm putting this inside the stamp tool, and again, you can replace this sheet. So if it gets inky or wet, like I'm going to do later, it's very easy to replace. But you peel off the back side of this grid sheet and you apply it to your tool. And then when you're ready to do your stenciling or stamping or whatever you're going to use this tool for, you peel off the top piece, I guess, and you don't throw it away. You save the pieces so you can store this sticky sheet as needed. So I'm just going to save the sheet that will protect the top while it's closed and I'm not using it. But I'm really excited to try this tool out. So I'm going to be using the Snowflake Scene Layered Stencils from Sizzix. As you can see, I was also gifted a few other ones. I have the Ornaments Layered Stencils, the Tartan Frame Layered Stencils, and some stamp sets, which I'll get into next. But I really wanted to use the Snowflake card or Snowflake stencil to make a snowflake card. And there's these two little holes at the top of each of these different stencil layers, and they are numbered 1 through 4, so I know, what order I can use them in. And they fit in those little notches, I guess, these little tiny circle pieces that come out from that pink tool. So you can use a stencil and it will help keep the stencil in place while you're stenciling, which is great, especially for layered stencils, to make sure that you are lining up each of the layers together correctly. So I also have some stamps. I have the Art Nouveau. I hope I said that right. I'm not a good French speaker. The Corner Wreath, Forest Deer, and Tiny Snowflakes stamp set. And I'm going to use the Seasonal Sentiments. That was the other stamp set I got. Sorry, I had a total brain freeze. So I'm going to grab a sheet of A2 Mixed Media White Smooth Cardstock from scrapbook.com. These are brand new. I'm not sure at the time of doing this voiceover if they're available or if they're still in the coming soon, but I will link them down below. And in case they are still coming soon, you can add it to be notified when they're in stock. But this is some really nice, smooth, thick white cardstock. I love it. I can't wait to use it for more mixed media things. I know I'm not a big mixed media person, but I do like layering and embossing and splattering. So my cardstock can take a little bit of abuse when it comes to the amount of products that I put on it. So I want to make sure my cardstock stays nice. So I'm excited to use this in future products. But since this was gifted to me along with the 6x8 size, I wanted to use it for today's project. So for the stenciling, I have my stencil and stamp tool ready to go for my stencil. My paper is stuck to the sticky grid. I have my stencil, which is also kind of stuck to the sticky grid and in place with those two little circle notches that are sticking out, so for me to be able to place that stencil. And I'm going to be using scrapbook.com inks and blending brushes. I was gifted 3 more small blending brushes, but I do have quite a few in my stash already. So I am doing teals first. So the darkest teal I'm doing is Lagoon Blue. Again, this is a hybrid ink pad from scrapbook.com, and I'm just adding it through that first layer of my stencil to add in the darker blue for my snowflakes. I'm doing a blue and purple kind of color vibe, which I really like for snow. So I'm excited to see how this turns out. For the second stencil, I just peeled off the first one and placed the second one on, again lining it up with those little circle, I guess they're more pegs than notches, and put the stencil on and made sure it kind of stuck to the sticky mat as well. And I love that I didn't have to worry about layering my stencil correctly, that the whole tool and the little pegs that the stencil sit on does all that work for you. So for the next layer, I'm using a lighter purple, and this is Parisian purple, again scrapbook.com hybrid ink pad, and I'm just laying down a nice soft color through the openings of this second stencil. And I know that I normally kind of fast forward through my stenciling because you don't need to see me line up my stencils every time, but I'm going to show you all the steps because I love how easy it is to just pull up the stencil, grab the next layer, and line it up with the little holes on the top of the tool or on the tool, and then everything is just lined up perfectly for you. So for the third one, I'm going to be using a darker purple. This is Crushed Velvet, again a hybrid ink pad from scrapbook.com, and I'm using the same purple ink blender. I just have one blending brush per color family, and I just wipe it off on a cloth when it gets a little saturated with ink. And then for the fourth and final stencil, I'm going to use, I wonder if you're going to guess it, but another scrapbook.com hybrid ink pad. This time I'm going to use the color Caribbean. It's kind of a softer teal color. So I just wiped my blending brush a little bit to get some of the excess ink off, and then picked up new ink with my brush and went ahead and added it through the details of this final stencil. Now I definitely could have used some stencil paste, but I'm just going to do just basic coloring through the stencil using ink pads, as this is my first time with the tool and I'm just trying to learn how to use it effectively and hopefully correctly for today's project. So after I get all of the ink down for this layer, I'll go ahead and do a final stencil reveal, and you'll see how pretty this layering snowflake stencil is. It's so pretty. I just love the details that you get for that really big snowflake, kind of the bottom right. I just think it's so pretty. Now here's where I messed up. I am used to cleaning off whatever my stencils got ink on, but you don't clean this. As you can see, I totally ruined it by adding water. Now it's not like ruined, because I can still use it, but it's definitely not. I've lessened the integrity of my paper piece, which is so silly. Like looking back on this, I added water to paper. Of course it was gonna, lower the integrity of it. But in my head, I thought, oh, let me just wipe off the ink. But you don't wipe off the ink on this. I tried looking at the instructions about cleaning. I think you just use it as is, and then you get a new sheet when it's time, when the stickiness goes away, or maybe you have too much ink. I will do more research when I use this next time. But I was like, okay, it's fine. It's a replaceable piece, no big deal. Let's just move on. So another thing to use this stencil and stamp tool is, if you haven't guessed in the name, it's also stamping. So you don't really use that clear plastic top for when you're stenciling, because you need those notches to be able to use the stencil adapter tool. But you can use it by placing the clear piece back inside the joint area. So I just put the plastic piece back in, and you can use it as a stamping platform. Now here's my second mess up. I think I needed to clean these stamps a little bit, because when I just kind of twisted my stamp platform, my sparkle sentiment slid a little, and I inked it with my clear embossing powder, and I'm not really paying attention. I have my tool here to press on that ink, and that's when I realized, wait, this is not straight anymore. And you can see my head here and my dumbfounded look of, what did I just do? I tried adding some anti-static powder to see if I could recover, but I didn't. You can still see the sparkle just stamped really wonky. So I decided that, you know what, let's just make another background. I will keep this stencil background for something else. Maybe I'll add an image where I stamped funky with my sentiment, but I went ahead and stenciled again another background, which was actually super easy because of the stamping tool. I got it done pretty fast, no big deal. So let me try stamping again with the platform. So I put the plastic piece back in for where you add the stamps. I'm putting my sentiment on. And the thing is, also, because I'm using a hybrid ink pad, my ink stays a little bit wet, like you need time to dry or use anti-static powder. And I didn't do that. So right now you're going to see my, I guess, third mistake. Where am I at right now? Yeah, third. I should have added anti-static powder before stamping my sentiment in an embossing ink. Again, because I'm using a hybrid ink pad, the stencil design stays a little wet for a little longer than a regular dye ink pad does. So I put embossing powder all over and I just got embossing powder stuck to all my snowflakes. I was just like, what I really should have done is just stepped away and, gave myself some time. But I was persistent. I was like, okay, let's rethink this. So I went ahead and scraped off all of that embossing powder, and I'm going to stamp my sparkle sentiment on some purple smooth cardstock. This is from the Cools from scrapbook.com. I'm all out of purple in my A2, so I have my Slimline, but that's okay. It's still perfect size for my sentiment. So I'm going to stamp this sentiment just like I did earlier with embossing ink, and then I added my Wow Silver. This is polished silver superfine embossing powder. And I'll go ahead and let that dry. But I was thinking, even though I messed up my sparkle sentiment, I could still emboss the little sparklies that I stamped on the background because it doesn't overlap with any of my snowflake stencil design. So I can wipe it off and just make sure I have embossing powder on just on the white part where I'm stamping my little sparkles. So I was able to get embossing powder on the one I stamped with the platform. I just grabbed a clear block to stamp my second little sparkle cluster. And again, I'm just using my brush to wipe off any embossing powder that got stuck to my stencil design. So I went ahead and melted those down, and by now my sparkle should be nice and cool. So I'll go ahead and fussy cut it out. I'm just kind of cutting around, giving it a bubble cut, or however you want to call that, a shadow cut around my sentiment. And I'm pretty happy with how things are going. I recovered, I think, quite well for not understanding how to use my tool. I should have read the instructions before I started filming, but that's okay. We're learning together. I'm making the mistakes so you don't. Let me know if you have this tool in the comments and any advice that you have for me going forward, because I do plan on making another video with this tool, and I want to make sure that I cover everything, all the questions that you have or pointers that you can give me. So when I make another video, it's much more helpful to other people and to me. So because I'm using a mixed media cardstock, I wanted to add some embellishment to this background. So I decided to use my Cloud Whip white mixed media modeling paste, and it comes kind of dry or chalky, I guess, to be able to mix it with other mediums without it being crazy runny. But the thing is I did want it runny for this purpose, so I added a lot of turquoise waters gloss pops of color and created my own kind of Cloud Whip mixed media splatter, but it does take some time to dry, and as you know, I'm an impatient crafter from this whole entire video, so I went ahead and used my heat gun to try and dry those pops of color Cloud Whip splatter that I got on my card. They turned out really nicely, like a pale teal color, so I'm really happy with how that turned out. And then I used my Sizzix trimming tool to cut this piece down to 4 by 5 1/4. I wasn't originally going to do that, or I would have done that in the beginning, but I wanted to add a layer of color to my background before I glue it to a card base. So I grabbed the darker blue A2 piece of smooth cardstock from the Sherbet collection, and then because my card front isn't totally dry, I'm going to use my liquid glue to glue this to my blue piece of cardstock. I was going to use a tape runner, but I was worried about adding too much pressure to the back and ruining my splatter that I made since it still needed to dry a little. So I just use liquid glue to glue those together, but normally I would use a tape runner. And I wanted to pop up my sentiment, so I'm using my 1/8 foam strips from scrapbook.com, and I peel off both sides of the release paper when I'm trying to curve my foam, so that way I can fit around the S without having to cut up my pieces of foam. I could just, curve it and it will fit nicely behind my sentiment. And I adhered it to where I originally stamped sparkle on the background to hide the embossing ink that was no longer going to be embossed. That way my sentiment, hides my little mistake there. And then I added a few more turquoise waters, gloss pops of color to the card. I added it in the center of some of my snowflakes, and I covered up some areas where I accidentally squished the pops of color mixed in with the Cloud Whip, my little splatter that I made. And then it does say sparkle, so I thought maybe I should have used a pops of color that was glitter. So I added just a few more, this time with teal twinkle glitter pops of color. And this is my card front. I'll add it to my card base once everything dries, but I really like how I recovered and how this card turned out. I think the tool is pretty cool. I don't know if I'll use it necessarily for stamping. I love using my Misty, but I do love it for the stenciling. It just made lining up the stencils so quick and easy, and I really appreciated that. So I will do more research on this tool, and I promise the next video should hopefully go a little smoother. And make sure to leave me your comments so I can address them in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!